evening. I know it says 7, but if it goes beyond that, then who needs Monday Night Football, right? We need for that. The way we like to run this evening, the principals have index cards. Council will hand out if you have questions, and then we'll bring them up front, and then we'll try to answer them. Those we can't get to, if you don't get to your question, then we'll try to come on up, and then we'll try to respond one-on-one. Are you all set to go in the back with the interpreters and headphones? Pardon? Okay. If the principals raise your hands, I mean everybody knows this. So we can see you all. Thank you. We wanted to talk tonight about the enrollment increases that have been going on for the last few years. And first, to know that we work with the building principals in a committee and board members. Gladys Cooper is here, a board member on the committee. Bob Tavasek is on the committee. From the city, Mary Teicher, Mary, sitting in front with me. I'm going to forget it, I'm sure. Irving Fox is the chairman of the board. He is with us also. Kathy Molnar, a board member, is here as well. We're very interested in this overcrowded situation. Okay. What happened was 2 years ago, we had a demographer come in, and there was a study conducted of the school buildings throughout the city. Not only the city schools, but also the city buildings. I guess there's about 70 sites that the city runs. As officially, we don't own the buildings, we're just renters. The city owns the buildings, so they're really responsible for making sure that, that they're maintained and they're operational. When they did the assessment back then, it was determined that there was a space issue. We also hired a demographer who did some special work, and in fact, he's coming back this year to follow up. In the county of Fairfield, we are the only city really that's increasing. Where others, you may be reading the paper, they've built and they've kind of overbuilt. In our case, we need the space. When I first took this job in this very auditorium, which was 6 years ago now, in the spring, we talked about, what are we going to do with the middle schools? The middle schools are an issue for us, and we'll be working with that, as well as the high school. Our primary discussion is we're focusing on the elementary school. There's a citywide committee called 2020, where we want to be in the year 2020, and the purpose of that is to try to bring to all of you and to the town council. There are town council folks here today. Would you raise your hands? Tom Scott, Mr. Perkins, Denise here. They will be hearing from the mayor in terms of what the 2020 committee is going to recommend. And that is a separate process from what we're doing. What I talked to the board about this summer was that we should try to plan to remedy our own situation we have control under. And if the city decides to annex or put up another building or two, then that will assist us greatly. But we were concerned about this fall when we started, next fall when we started. This past fall, we began growing in August, unexpected. And not in so much the areas that we thought we would. There's a few schools that went over and above the enrollments. The demographer, when he did his work, they did a very comprehensive job. They looked at all the building permits, they looked at the birth rate from 5 years ago, and then they make a determination of how many students we can expect. What's happening is that some of the condos that are up for sale and other buildings like that seem to be becoming available to more of our traditional residents, making the smaller homes they're moving out to open to more of residents that would have children. So even though we don't get a lot of students, particularly from the condos, we're beginning to get more as residents move into the condos and those homes become available. That the research is really taking account for. So as we move forward in the fall, we started looking at, do we need to redistrict the entire town? And with all of the principals, we met quite a number of times to look at the impact, and which we looked at the entire city, then we looked at what we call pocket redistricting. And all that means is that instead of taking the entire city of Danbury, is to look at specifically the places where the growth is really coming to us, and then taking what the demographer did and the city study regarding the building usage, and to see if we could put something together that made sense, and something that wouldn't impose so greatly on the families. And that was the concern the board had and the rest of us, was to put the burden on the families regarding where your child's going to go to school. Everybody has an expectation of where they're going to go, and in fact, if they can't go there, you know, we better have a good reason why they can't go there. So as we looked at this, the initial determination was that perhaps 3 or 4 of the buildings would take about 70 students out of them. We had to look at the city and figure out where they would come from. And some of the criteria that we looked at, which was based on work that was done in the district for a number of years. There's been about 3 or 4 studies done about redistricting to great expenses. What I did, or what we did, was look at their criteria and try to apply it to what we were doing, instead of bringing in an outside consultant and doing all that. One of the things that we looked at was we knew that if we were going to move anyone, we would try to move areas, instead of just trying to pick different areas for the 7 students. So we first had to identify areas that we would move the students from, so that they would maintain a sense of consolation and family, and we wouldn't be splitting families. We're also trying to be sensitive that, seeing how this is K-5, that if there are 5th grade students that will be entering next year, that we not disrupt them, that we let them stay and remain into those home schools. And in fact, if it's a family consolation, we will let the family stay as well. So as we looked at all of this, we started refining the numbers. And as it turned out, there were about 3 schools where we moved 7 students, as I said. As we looked at the lens that we were looking at, as I told the committee, is that if we're going to move students from school A and put them in school B, let's not worsen the case of school B or school A. Let's make sure that, in fact, it's going to be better for the students, and the quality of education is not going to be hampered or harmed, that it would be a better venue for students. Well, we looked at those buildings that we can send students, and what's happened in Danbury is that we're all overcrowded at each of the sites. There wasn't a site where we really had enough room, other than Mill Ridge Intermediate, that we closed 2 years ago, and the Early Head Start is there along with other programs, where they really could take on a number of students comfortably, and the sending school would really be impacted positively, and the receiving school would also. In fact, it harmed both in some respects. We already have art on the cart, music on wheels. We do have cafeteria where the kids eat, they necessarily eat in the gym and listen together. So we're utilizing every square inch that we can. So our hope that I said to the board was that in one of the meetings that we step back and look at this. Do we really want to redistrict, or do we build on something that was done here in the past and we did this year, which was pairing schools up? We decided that would be the best venue that we would recommend to the board. The board is here tonight to listen. It's an open process to hear what parents have to say about it, and that's what I want to go over this evening. We're not looking at a massive redistricting. We're looking at next fall, highlighting a few schools that are crowded, and assist them with another school where we can send students to that school. And that's what I wanted to go through this evening. Is that clear? Is that sort of as I go through here? Okay? All right. So I'm going to ask the committee, do I need to bring something else up before we go into the presentation? Dr. Glass, where are you, Dr. Glass? Anything? Okay. Principals, anything? Okay. Let's take a look at this. Did all of you get, we sent these to the school last week, the recommendations. We also have them on the website. I have some extra ones if you need them. As I just said, we recommended to the board that we not implement a pocket redistricting plan for this year. that we not do that. That we move into a sister school approach so that we can look at and see what the city's going to do down the road. I mean, without question, that if nothing happens, we have a space problem. Looking at additions at each of the schools, or maybe looking at modules, the law has changed regarding reimbursement levels and things of that nature, where it makes it much more appealing to a city to build rather than to rent, or to get modules into the school system. Okay, next slide. Again, any form of redistrict would be extremely disruptive to families. The concept of creating parity between sending and receiving students cannot be accomplished in the redistricting that we were thinking about, the pocket redistricting. Get the next one. The enrollment that we use is October 1. Now I can tell you already it's changed from October 1. And but those are the numbers that we use, that we send to the state, and then they make determinations about when we apply, if we apply for any additional space, either a building or additions, that's the numbers that they use. So right now, our elementary school has been growing. The materials will tell you somewhere between, on a given day, 90 to 100 students. We have a 39% mobility rate, which means that during the year, we lose almost 40% of our students either out of district or in the district. Some of those students move within the town. Our mobility rate is quite high, but our number right now is about 100 that we increased overall. The middle schools, for your information, both were about 1150. So there's a parity between those two schools. The high school grew a little bit. It's just over 3,000. It is the largest high school in the state by itself. Next one. Okay. One of the schools that we looked at that has some space, that has space for two schools, Great Plains and Haystown. Haystown, those of you who don't know, but a few years ago we moved out a number of our preschool programs over the prairie, over to Millridge Intermediate, which gave us some space over at Haystown. That's a large school. The nice thing about Danbury, I think, even though our high school is large and our middle schools, we've been able to maintain small elementary schools. And that's a target we'd like to stay with. But Haystown, by moving students out, it was up to about 420 students. By moving students out, they were then, they had less student enrollment there, so they created some more space. They're growing, but not at the same rate as the other schools. When we looked at the cost of redistricting, and we all know money is hard to come by, that if we were to redistrict and move the students around between the busing and the added staff, it was roughly going to be between, it says 1,100,000. It was roughly between 900 and over, just over $1 million. Not only didn't it make sense to do for parents and disruptions and quality of space, but it was awful costly to do something that we really weren't going to get any real impact that would be that positive. So that's another reason why we didn't want to do it. The current enrollment-driven concerns are at Morris Street School, and that is the one school, Bill is right here, that has grown over what we expected to. Here's what we've discovered at the schools. If we were to redistrict, let's say we took 70 students from a school, we couldn't guarantee the levels of these students. By the enrollment being as high as it is, and the students being distributed throughout the K-5, we wouldn't gain the space that we really need. The only way we could gain space is by moving a program. Over at Morris Street School, even though they're larger, they have some early childhood programs that are self-contained. And what Bill and his staff have decided to do at this point, rather than to move the students out of that area, we would monitor his enrollment, and then if we needed to have some other classrooms, we would then up one of the programs, early Head Start programs, the preschool programs, and either not have it or move it to another building, giving them an actual classroom so we can have an extra section if needed. Right now, I know they're not using your media center, your technology center. You have cows would go on computer on wheels, so everything's being utilized, and that would be one way of approaching Morris Street. The other schools are a little bit different, however. Next slide. The Saturn report that it refers to is the commission report that the city had conducted 2 years ago, where they went through and did an analysis. Now what they did was they took the board goals about each classroom and they just did a build out of those. For example, at our K1, 2, it may be 22 students to a class, and then at the upper intermediate, it may be 24 to 25. So they just took that and just multiplied the number of classrooms by those numbers and came up with a capacity. So when you look at some of this material, it may say 300 students, and yet you know you have 400 students in that building. That's accurate. Well, because we're using more of the rooms that are available and our class sizes have increased. So that's why they're larger. The schools are monitored each year by the fire marshal. They go in and make sure that we're in compliance. There's no issues with that. It's just the way that the study was conducted. Formalize the college school. There are 2 schools that we thought we would be able to work with, and that would be Shelter Rock and Great Plains. Mill Ridge Primary School in Haystown would have would be one arrangement. We would prefer sending the Mill Ridge Primary students to King Street, where students attend 4 or 5, but King Street Elementary is growing, and it didn't make sense to put 3 students in there. So Haystown, with the room that they have, that we would be able to send students to Haystown comfortably, and then we would be able to accommodate those students, particularly in the short run. And if I haven't said that, I mean to be short run. This is not going to be more than 2 years when something needs to happen other than this. I talked a minute ago about downsizing the pre-kindergarten readiness program. Those are 2 special programs at Morris Street by 1 class. Those students really benefit by the program because those students there actually attend Morris Street School. Part of their success stories have been working with these youngsters at a very early age and with parents, and by keeping them there, it makes a smooth transition into their primary, into kindergarten. And that's been very valuable to their success. That's why they're not willing to give that up, but we may have to give up one of the classrooms if in fact she needs it for enrollment increases. Do you want to go back? I think I missed one. Mill Ridge Primary in Haystown. Did we miss something as well? 4. Pardon? Okay. The other 2 schools that we have would be Shelter Rock and Great Plains. We started that this year. Great Plains, in fact, over at Shelter Rock, when we had registration in the spring, we've already been at 90 kindergartens. We, the year before, had somewhere in the vicinity of 60 during registration. But when we opened up, we actually wound up getting less. But 3rd grade seemed to really push us. So at that grade level, we did send some students already to Shelter Rock so that we would be able to accommodate the classes for the students properly at that school. The only thing that we're telling the board that we think we're going to need with this would be probably 2 more buses in order to make this work. Danbury is under a choice system. Some of our schools have not made, according to the government, Leave No Child Behind, what we call yearly progress. And those schools have given parents an opportunity to leave that school and go to another school. And some parents have made themselves available to that. And that's put the pressure on us because we're moving students from the entire town. We're doing it right now with the same bus fleet. If we were to do this, we probably need to add 2 more buses to our fleet in order to accommodate it. Each bus roughly runs between $60,000 and $65,000. So you can see the differential between 1 million and this. And we think it makes more sense for the youngsters and their families if in fact we were to run this. The question came up at a meeting, well, if you do this, next year, and students wish to return to their home school the following year, can they do that? Well, the answer would be yes, if there's space. I mean, our whole notion here is to try to make the experience the most positive as we can. And if there's room for you at your home school, we would try to get you back to that school as quick as we were able to do it. But we have to spend the 1 year at the sister school in order to make it work. Is there another slide? The 2020 task force will make the long-term solution, and that, I think, this is my guess, this group has been meeting for on and off for a while. Somewhere this winter or this late fall, I would think that the powers that be will make a presentation to the town council, and then that will kick something forward that some kind of a vote may happen this spring. To keep in mind, one of the things that we need to do is, we think we need another elementary school in order to make this work, or additions. There is one school that may be available, and that's Mill Ridge Intermediate. There are 28 classrooms in there, and probably over half of them are preschool right now, early Head Start. They will be moving to the city, building a site for them downtown, and something they've acquired some years back. They've leveled it, and they're building a modular complex for them, making MRI available for us for our enrollment purposes. Doesn't solve our middle school issue. The middle school is also part of this study. We would like to see a third site for them as well. It would not be as large as a school like this. It might be a school of about between 550 and 650. But that we'll all have to wait until this spring, if in fact all of you decide it's a good idea and it gets voted in. And that'll come through the mayor's office at that time. One of the things that we will, if things grow much more aggressively, the thing that we'll have next year that we don't have this year is Mill Ridge Intermediate. Right now, it's fully occupied. As the early Head Start moves out, those classrooms are going to become available to us. As they become available to us, then we can program and move students in there if need be. My only caution to the board is that we have no control over that. Construction may not go well, and that might not become available. That's why we didn't put that as part of our solution at this point. That may be something we'd have an opportunity to relook at if in fact it happens. So right now our assumption is that it won't happen. And if that's the case, how are we going to accommodate and plan for next year? You as parents ought to have an idea of where your student is going to attend. This will only apply to new students to the district. So if we open up next year, those students that are there, we fully expect that they will remain there. New students coming in are the ones that we're going to have to look at to relocate to make this work. I'm going to ask the committee members, they were part of it. Is there anything I should bring up before I open up the question and answer? No? Dr. Glass? Okay, I have some cards. Did you distribute the cards? We tried the microphone thing in the spring with the meeting that we had here, and believe me when I tell you, it did not work. It just did not work. We did not get everything done, so we'd rather try it this way. So if you have a question, we'll put the cards out to you. Questions, Becky?
I'm not enough to be heard, so can I ask, somebody explain the sister program, because I don't know what
Okay,
that is.
it's just putting two schools in pairs. You know, we call it the sister program because that's what we've used before in the literature that we had in the school system. So it's putting two schools together and calling them sister schools rather than brothers. Same thing.
Sister brother,
Yeah.
but how does that, I don't understand.
It balances, they work in balancing pair. For example, the students at Shelter Rock will be going to Great Plains. Great Plains has space to accommodate students, so we put the two of them together. So that's how we form the schools. We looked at geographically, if there was a better way to do it, if it was closer. We could not find a school that made sense to send the students to because of space. That was the best that we could do. And so that's how we came up with the arrangements.
So this is a question from a parent whose child currently enrolled in grade point was a shelter student.
I'm going to read it out loud for you. We are a rollover family. Will my children be moved back into this school closer to where we live, or will they stay in this partner school? Maybe that's a better word, partner school. Our intent is that the students, given that if they are moved, I don't know why your child was moved, because if you're in school right now, you should be okay. It really is, unless something drastic happens, it ought to be just new students that are coming to the district that should be affected by this. But if for some reason you have to move, our expectation is that you'd have to stay there a year, but given the opportunity to return to the other school, your home school.
We're right there, that's my question.
You're okay.
Okay, no, I mean, we're at Great Plains, but we live in Shoulder. So we're like one of the 10 children that are,
Oh, okay, you're one of
So
the,
we
you,
just wanted to-
at this point, you probably wind up staying there.
at Great Plains.
Yes.
Great.
Staying there.
Will there still be a King Street magnet school?
Want to vote on that? The question was, will there still be a King Street magnet school? The meeting I just mentioned, that we had some difficulty with the questions. One of the ideas, it was simply an idea of very possibly creating a magnet school. And at that time, we were uncertain about what was going to happen with Mill Ridge. And looking at all the schools, we talked about the possibility of one of the school sites, and that was King Street at that point. There's two on the same campus there. If one of them would turn into a magnet school and draw from the entire town students there, so that we can balance the enrollment. At this point, that thinking is no longer prevalent. We really think that the best way to go, if possible, would be utilization of Mill Ridge Intermediate as a possibility as an elementary school, given if we get a middle school. If we don't get a middle school, then we're going to have some real pressures, because then this building here in Rogers Park are beyond their maximum. And any of you who've ever lived through a split schedule, where half the students come for a while, and it's bedlam, very costly. So we would have to come up with a middle solution if, in fact, we need a third middle school. Then we're faced with some other problems. But at this point, the King Street idea is no longer on the table at this point.
There's three questions that are similar. The question is there a specific area in Mill Ridge Primary that's being targeted? How would you determine which students would be moved? And clarification that would only new students be relocated, and could current families stay at their home school?
Current families can stay at their home school. We haven't targeted anybody in Mill Ridge. We only did that when we were looking at it, in fact, we had to identify or repocket and redistrict it, so that no longer is on the table. And the third one, can they return to their home school?
Do you have a specific area in mind for
No.
Mill Ridge Primary?
No, we don't. We don't at this point. It would be nice with Mill Ridge Intermediate next to it if we can utilize some of that, but again, we don't really know what's going to happen with that. We assume everything will go well, will give us some other opportunities. But right now, they're scheduled to go to Kingston.
And at what point in the year will you have a final plan? How much notice will parents have?
Good question. Question was, at what point in the year will you know about this, and how long the parents, when they can expect to know what's going on? This is, tonight's meeting, we were going to have a meeting at each school and make it smaller. But because we didn't do a whole redistricting, we thought we better bring everybody together. The board is here to listen to the Q&A that we're doing and feedback. They would like to have a recommendation that they're going to follow because of the budget impact. So I would say sometime in November, certainly by the first of the year, we'll all have an idea of what's going on regarding this. So, early is better than late, and we're going to try to get it done early. But most of this is predicated on building the budget as well.
We have two questions that are similar from parents. If you have a younger sibling that's entering kindergarten, will that be considered a new student if the other siblings already attend school?
Our idea is to try to keep families together. Now, unless the upper school kid wants to leave, you know, we would probably try to accommodate the youngster there because you have your family there. Our whole idea here is trying to not split families up. We don't think that's a good idea. You know, we have that situation when we send some students get into magnet schools and others do not. We know how pressure it is, so of course if we don't have the room, then we have an issue we got to deal with. But you know, our intent would be to first look at making sure that student gets to stay, so that the family is intact. They're at the same school.
The next question is, where will the special education preschool classes be located in 2012-13? I'm Joyce Salmon, I'm the Director of Special Services for the district, and our intent is to keep the preschool classes at Mill Ridge Intermediate for the 2012-13 school year. The Head Start program is likely to move into their new facility, but the preschool program will remain there for the 2012-13 school year. Next question. Where will this year's Mill Ridge Primary third grade students attend school 2012-13? So they'll be fourth graders.
Those students should be at King Street Intermediate, where there's room.
I don't think we know the answer to this one yet. If and when the Mill Ridge Intermediate school becomes available, which students will go here? We did say for the 2012-13 school year, the preschool youngsters will still be here.
Do all schools have computer in our classrooms? If so, why must Great Plains do it well? Good question. The question is all the schools in town, primary schools, do they have an art and a music room? And the question is, if so, why must Great Plains lose theirs? No, I know, that was the question. You're right, and that's how, what we discovered was one of the approaches to handle overcrowding is to utilize the core classrooms for the special areas. Danbury has done that. That's one of the reasons why it didn't make sense to move students into another building. So we're using every spot we have for specialists and computer on wheels, so they're classrooms. So Great Plains is just going to wind up falling in line with what the other schools are doing. That's why I said this is short term. We can't take any more saturation. If this was a bubble that we're going to go through, it's not a bubble. It's sustained growth over time. We're at 10,500. About 4 years ago, we were about 9,800 students. And we're just growing. As I said before, we're the only one in the county that seems to be growing. Good problem, but it also creates the issues with space. A minute on this subject, and there's no decision that's been made here on this. If Mill Ridge becomes available to the board as a separate site for an elementary school, there's two ways that they're going to have to look at it. If in fact the city approves another site for a middle school, then the board knows that they have a site for middle school, which makes Mill Ridge Intermediate available to an elementary school. That elementary school could take two forms. It could be a typical elementary with its own attendance area. If that were to happen, we'd have to go to the entire city of Danbury and cut out a redistricting map, which would allow every one of your schools to go back to having an art room and a music room and having ample space. By doing that, we're going to have to take from each of the 10 elementary schools in order to make this work. So if you take about 50 students from each building, and you have an elementary school now, it's going to be hard to be about 500 students to make that work. The other way to make it work is to make it a magnet school. And there was some discussion about that, but it's just a discussion about possibilities. If that were to happen, then everybody has an opportunity to go there. Except that we'd have to ensure that every school is sending 40 to 60 students there, so that we don't have a problem in some of the schools that are overcrowded. That's why it's going to take a lot of thought about how to do that. So if there is another elementary school, we're not sure what form it's going to take at this point. We'll know more about that as we start going through this process.
I'm going to try to group some of the questions together so that it makes more sense. This is a Shelter Rock question. Is there a correlation between the condo development at Shelter Rock and an increase in school population at Shelter Rock School? If yes, what plan was put in place to address the increase in school enrollment?
When the demographer looked at the numbers, we asked that question as well. And what we're told is we would be getting the students out of there that we would get out of a typical home. Well, that's not what really has happened. That particular area is having more students come out of it. The plan is what we have done. We create this partner school and send those students there. We talked a little bit about additions by utilizing modules, but that did not happen. We weren't able to do that. So the plan that we have is simply to create this partner school. But we seem to be getting students out of that one condo area. Julie, is that correct? That's the area we talked about, right? Julie's the principal there. In fact, we went back there and we started walking around, trying to look at the bus stops there, and there were students out there. So I think that was missed, quite frankly. But I don't honestly know what could have done that much different. With the economy being as it is, I can tell you it's difficult running the city as it is. And, it would have taken to put these modules in, and we didn't see it happening at this point. That's why our hope is that something as the early Head Start moves out of Mill Ridge, it gives us a site so that we can relocate students. So I guess on that question specifically, I think we just got to say we missed that.
What happens if kindergarten enrollment at Shelter Rock exceeds the allotted number of classrooms? How do you determine who stays?
Principal? You all like her better. We don't see that. We think we're going to be able to accommodate them. And we had some ideas about what we would do. I mean, the bottom line is that we'd have to send them to the other site where there is room. We know that. But we don't think it's going to grow at that point. I mean, this year we opened up, we thought we had a major problem, and then it went the other way. It went down to 20, 25 less than we anticipated, right? About 25 less. Maybe they moved over to Morris Street. I mean, that's one of the things we're looking at, where the parents coming from, where they're moving from, trying to get a handle on some of this stuff. It seems that half are coming from out of town, and the others are kind of moving in the community itself.
This is asking for clarification. On the back page of the information packet, you say you want to create a sister school relationship between Mill Ridge and Haystown. Yet on the chart on the previous page, you say Mill Ridge students would go to Great Plain. Likewise, you talk about formalizing the pilot sister school relationship between Shelter Rock and Great Plain, but the chart says Shelter Rock students would go to Haystown. Would you please clarify?
Pardon? What you see here is the action plan that we presented to the board, and its thinking has been evolving. At one point, that's the way it was going to be until we made the switch. We got everybody in the room, and we took a look at it with the principals there, and the numbers, and the back page is the correct page, with the way we're splitting the students. To be somewhat blunt here, the best thing we can do is be as transparent as we can, and that's why you have here as much information as I have. We have the actual enrollments with the plus and minuses. You have the action plan that was presented to the board. And then you have the final recommendations that we're going to take to the board, of which they have not acted on. I mean, to say this is a fait accompli would not be accurate. The board is simply here listening. They're the ones who are going to have to make the determination. But as far as my staff and us looking at it, this is the way we think it should roll out for the benefit of students and families.
My daughter's class at Great Plains School seems to have over 25 children in her classroom. And Ms. Smith did confirm it's a third grade class with 26 students. If you are moving more children from other schools into what seems an already overcrowded classroom, what is your cap number for classrooms at Great Plains and Shelter Rock schools?
The only way we're going to be able to achieve that, we're probably going to add some, along with the buses that I mentioned, probably some staffing as well, in terms of teachers at each of the buildings that are receiving to make the numbers work. Our goal is to try to stay at the numbers that we have, which, I'm turning here to the principals. K1 is at 22, and then on up from that, the goal is 24, 25. Now, some schools have 22. Some schools have 26 or 27. It's, you know, the metrics here are very hard to attain throughout the district, but certainly if the numbers are going to exceed that in the 27, 28 range, 29, we're going to have to do something, and we're going to, that's, somebody asked when we're going to have this decided by. We're probably going to have to put some extra staffing in here in order to take care of that enrollment so that the school that they're going to doesn't have 30 kids in it. 32 kids, we're going to have to put other staff in there. In addition to that, we have to add specials in order for the youngsters to have their specials at the receiving schools.
No matter what the changes are, can you guarantee that my children will be in the same school? One is in kindergarten now, and the other is entering in 2013.
I want to start saying yes, but my kid's saying no. I don't know how I can. There's too many variables at this point. Just to say that we're going to try to keep the families together in the same schools. I mean, that's our goal. You know, and it depends on what the city winds up voting. I think this spring about their remedy to assist in this. And there's been a willingness there. We're hoping to look at some options. There'll be a recommendation made to this 2020 committee. Probably within the next few weeks, I would hope, so that the city can start talking about it. But I can't guarantee any of that.
Shelter Rock is at capacity now. What happens to the 5 current kindergarten classes going to full-time first grade in 2012? How does that affect the rest of the school?
Just a minute, come on. Obviously, we're going to have to send those students to their sister partner school, but we think we can accommodate them.
Actually, we're going to have to wait and see exactly how many students come, how many come. A lot of students did, well, a few did not come to us in grade K because they did not get full K. And some of them may be back next year for grade 1. So we just have to determine and just wait and see how many students actually enroll in grade K. And then we will take it from there and see what our numbers look like and see if we can accommodate them. If anything.
Some of this is disheartening. I realize that we don't have the answers to because we're really, all of the schools are pressured in space. But the board's been very mindful about making sure that we're accommodating youngsters. This year, we added 8 faculty to the, even though we wound up cutting back some areas, we added 8 staff over above what we had last year to accommodate for enrollment. When we came back, as it all worked out, we really added 9.5 because of specials at the elementary school. They've been very supportive of trying to make our class sizes respectful and responsible of the work that has to be done in those classrooms. So that's my only answer. You know, the hope is going to have to be in the board and in terms of making sure we try to bring in teachers in order to make it work. Space-wise, we know we're at our wit's end with the space. Everybody's using that, but, you know, if we add some space and we add staff, that decreases some of that. But again, it's going to be very short-lived. You have a question on 504?
Yes. The question is, how do you expect children that are on 504 plans or IEPs, in other words, students with disabilities, how do you expect them to succeed in an overcrowded classroom? And a great question, and certainly size does count. We do some differentiated staffing based on youngsters with significant disabilities, and so we do place youngsters in classrooms, and we do look at the size of the classroom. We do that. Many youngsters have mild disabilities, and we find different ways of grouping to be able to accommodate their needs. So they do some small group work with a special education teacher included in the classroom. So, you know, we do have ways of accommodating youngsters that have specific needs in included classrooms. So there are two questions that are related. Two that were related, but I'll read you another one. What is the procedure to confirm students actually live in Danbury when registering for school? It is common knowledge that there are kids from other cities using false addresses. Would this help to lower enrollment and more strict requirements?
You know, that comes a lot. Let me just tell you what happens. If the school secretary finds out information, and sometimes it's returned mail and things of that nature, we have a process. And we actually have a person who's hired to go out and investigate after the school goes through a number of their own protocols to make sure if in fact, we have some questions about students who are attending our school that don't really live in town. So we're aggressive at that. How many students that we have doing that, I couldn't tell you. It varies by year sometimes. You know, it could be a family, 2 or 3 kids. Some years it could be more than that are doing it. But you know, this idea that students get in and stay in, you know, that does happen. It does happen. But if in fact we discover that someone is here illegally non-attending, that's attending and they shouldn't be, we have a process to remove them. And we do that. We have, as I say, as it goes through about the 3rd step, someone's hired to go out and check at night and check a number of things. You know, people call and say, oh, someone's coming to a bus stop. Well, what you all don't know is that there are split families and there's dual custody. And Connecticut allows students to attend either school district. Even though if I live in Southern and you know, my spouse lives here, well, and the kid, they're allowed to attend depending on the divorce decree. So, you know, so when parents call sometimes, we don't give them a complete answer because it's not really their business. It's just not fair. We can't do that. It's not appropriate. But you just need to know that we take it very seriously and we check them out. And sometimes if the student remains, and that does happen, there's a good reason why they remain. You know, so if the students are here illegally, we're very careful making sure that, in fact, we put them on notice and we send them out.
There are 2 related questions. One is, if the readiness program leaves Moore Street, will it be relocated or just dropped altogether? And the other question that goes with it is, why consider closing an early intervention room when research shows the sooner you intervene, the closer the student gets to his or her peers and needs less service later in his academic career?
Hi, that's the last thing I want to have happen. I want to keep both of my preschools in the building. These are the kids that live in my school district, and they become my kindergarten kids. So it's not in anyone's interest to have these kids not be there. It would have to be a dire straight circumstance in order for that to happen, because it doesn't have my support or Sal's or Bill's support either. It would only be a drastic event that would cause that to happen. So we're all looking at keeping both of the preschools in my school.
I'm sorry, Dr. Glass had asked me to mention that there is daycare in the cafeteria. for any parent that wants to take advantage of that. The next question is, how many students do you estimate would go to Great Plains School next year? Approximately. And if it got to that point, is it possible to add resources to that school?
I'll let you answer that one. Okay? You're good. We will have to add resources. And it's just not a matter of redeploying the resources. We'd have to probably add some, either a teacher or specials. Regarding the numbers, I'll let you.
Okay.
Okay? I'm pretty sure you had 7.
Out of district, we have 9 Shelter Rock students and 4 choice students from Ellsworth. And those are the only children that are out of district that are coming from 2 other schools. And then we have from grades K through grade 5, 31. So the children, as far as the 31 were already within the count. Those new children that came to our school this year were 13. We received 13 children new to Great Plains for the first time. So this year coming, we look to see of course, maybe about the same. Because last year we had no more than 10 to come to our school again.
Great Plains also serves, one of the things that we have in Danbury, some of the schools are a site for special programs. They have special programs that Keisha's talking about that attend them. They have been there. The open choice thing I mentioned before, where parents can elect to leave, those schools will be closed to any other choice other than enrollment. That school will not be an option that parents can choose to send their children. If, in fact, we go through which the board accepts the partner role, Great Plains is not going to accept other students from other programs. Except those that are there attending, the law permits them to stay the entire time. You can't unenroll students from that program, so they will remain there. But we won't add to that.
The cards I have in my hand now are, some of them are suggestions and some overviews. So I'm going to read all of them, and then I think you could probably speak to.
Are you taking notes? You know we're filming it, right?
The first is, what do we need to do today to get more classroom space, and a timeline for the final resolution? How do we know that this is only temporary and that new classrooms or schools will be built? 7 years ago, New Haven was given a federal grant money to build 34 new schools. What is Danbury doing to build new schools to accommodate the area growth? Why was Roberts Avenue taken down if we need another school, and why don't we rebuild there? Why can't Millridge Intermediate be opened back up for grades 3 to 5 to decrease the overcrowding at MRP, or to house STEM? Can all kindergartners be sent to Millridge Intermediate and then return to their local schools for grades 1 through 5? This opens classrooms in schools and would allow for full-day kindergarten for all. The cost would be for teachers and buses. It seems as if we are putting a Band-Aid on the situation. Will the city be looking at giving the school system money to address the issue properly, rather than cutting our school budget and forcing us to come up with haphazard solutions to the overcrowding problem? And can we trust you and the Board of Education to have Shelter Rock on the April referendum to ensure that we have additional classrooms at our school in the near future?
Can't answer all those. I can't. I don't have that crystal ball here, but that's the problem we're faced with. We're running the schools based on resources that we have. New Haven went through a process that no longer is made available to other cities, where there was a tremendous reimbursement level in rehabbing their schools. I don't know, and that's been a number of years. Danbury didn't participate in that. Not many cities did. There was a lot of money that had to be put up front. So I don't know why Danbury decided to do what they did do, but I know when I arrived, Broadview and Rogers Park, there are additions on them. a school that was built by what they call a REST, a regional service region, and for some reason it was given to Danbury, and Danbury taxpayers didn't have to pay for it. So, in essence, we had a school that we didn't have to pay for. Now, not all of our students are there. It is an open enrollment for surrounding districts. We have roughly 260 students there of ours, and there's 140 from outside or more, and that's the model that was there. Ellsworth was built and planned because Roberts Avenue was taken down because it needed to be taken down. The agreement was made, apparently the university that owned that building was a lab school for them some time ago, and they needed the space for their growth. And the agreement was that when they build the new school and we move out of it, that school would return to them for $1 million. Am I correct? And I guess someone got $1 million for that, and the university leveled it. Now, being in that school and seeing that school, it needed to have major repair. Because that was one of the ideas that we had. Could we use that temporarily? It just, not to go into the detail, but the boiler and the rest, thank God the kids got out of there when they did. You know, they're safe and in a better learning environment. That place needed a major rehab. So that's why we couldn't use that. I can't guarantee what the city is going to do. I can just tell you the intent of the 2020 was to put together a recommendation. And what I heard the mayor and the rest talk about at a meeting when they came was that the idea is that it would be presented to the town council, and then from there it would go to a referendum in spring. So, you know, what will happen, it won't just be about Shelter Rock, it'll be about opening up possibly another middle school, and then, you know, taking NRI and turning it into another elementary. There were some other questions in there I'm sure I'm missing.
The use of Millbridge Intermediate.
The idea of kindergarten is an interesting one. In fact, the principals came up with that one. As I said before, if you're going to move K-5 and you take so many students from each of the classrooms, you're not going to get a classroom. But if you take a program, like the preschool program, that we don't want to move from North Street, but if you took the kindergarten and you created some districts have kindergarten centers, early childhood centers, you send out a kindergarten there, then that really creates, most buildings, there's about 3 classrooms at a kindergarten, AM, PM, or full day. That opens up classrooms. And that was one of the things that we talked about as a possibility. But the problem with that was we don't know what's going to happen in MRI. That may or may not be ready for us to occupy. So our solutions only are dealing with what we have control over at this point.
One more question from me. A suggestion, why not have 2 shifts? One going to school from 7 to 11:30, and the second going to school from 1 to 5, to accommodate the growth without building new buildings.
Some places have done it for, in fact, I think Danbury did do it some years ago. That was something they did do. So can that happen? Yes. You know, right now we don't need to do it. But if things go south in terms of, you know, the voters and the recommendation, we're going to have to look at something draconian like that. I can tell you, I lived through it and I taught through that. It was horrible for the families, for the teachers. Busing is a nightmare and very expensive, but it may be all that we have. So we can't just at hand discount it. But it's not anything we have to do at this point. There was something that was talked about. And for the high school and the middle school. The elementary really didn't have that conversation for them. It was really a middle school, high school conversation, but if need be, we may have to have it for them as well. Mr. Fox, the chairman of the board, has a few comments about the process as well. Thank you very much, and if I didn't answer something, I apologize. You know, email me or call me. I'm glad to look at it. If I don't have the answer, look into it. But thank you for your suggestions. And all I can say is please come out when we talk about these things. Your input is very important to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pasquarello. Once again, I'm Erwin Fox. I'm the chairman of the Danbury Board of Education. First thing, I just wanted to thank all of you for coming out this evening. You know, we've had meetings, as Dr. Pasquarello alluded to before, you know, as we try to develop new ideas to tackle the problems that we have. We're trying to become more transparent to the community, get their input, and get feedback before any decisions are made. So we referenced the meeting we had this spring or early summer when the idea of the King Street Magnet came up. We had a meeting here with those impacted communities, and I think the auditorium was full. So it's good to see people coming out, coming out in support of their schools and in support of the district. But the board really needs your input. We really need the community's input in order to make a decision that's going to serve all of us as best as possible. Going forward, what will happen is, and Dr. Pasquarello mentioned, the decisions haven't been made yet, and so the board will be meeting over the next couple of weeks. We're going to have a workshop to discuss the details of what you've heard here this evening. There are several board members here tonight, but we'll be talking about that as a group in public meetings, and those will be posted for people to come if they wish. But those decisions will be made over the next month or so. And one of the directions that we've set over the past several months, you know, when we talked about this in the early spring in terms of space issues, a lot of this was left to a 2020 committee and a permanent solution. But as it appears that we're going to need to take action before any of these plans are finalized, you know, it'll take at least 6 months to get a plan together to put out to a referendum in April, and that's 6 months away, and that's before any shovels hit the dirt. But our school population continues to grow day in and day out. Our population grows 1 to 200 every year for the past several years. So for the next year or 2 or 3, before something is actually finalized and built, we're going to need to take action. And I mentioned this at one of our recent meetings. You know, we need to make the most use of the space that we do have with as least disruption to the student population and to all of you as possible. And to do that, we can't wait for the 2020 committee for the long-term solution, although that work continues in earnest and those recommendations are still being drawn up. But we still need to take action internally in order to make sure that all of our students have a quality place to sit and that we're not all inconvenienced by split schedules or anything other ideas that may come up out of the blue that really don't make any sense. So what I would encourage all of you to do is, if all of your questions have been answered tonight, that's fine, but that's probably not anywhere in this room. I would encourage you all to contact us with additional questions or comments you have and attend the future meetings that come up. All of our phone numbers are on the district's website. You can email any of us as well. Our email addresses aren't on there, but if you go to foxirv@danbury.k12.ct.us, if you have any further feedback, I probably said that too quickly, but it's my last name, first 3 letters of my first name, and then the district's email address. I'd be happy to answer any additional questions, or give me a call. My home number is on the district's website, so no problem. I guess they have an enlisted phone number when you get elected. Dr. Glass? Councilman Sada?
Chairman Fine, I apologize. This is a question that came to mind. I'm chatting with a few other people here. And sorry, with this being a temporary solution, I understand the financial and logistical restrictions and that the long-term solution is brick and mortar expansion of schools potentially. Something coming out of the 2020 task force as a recommendation to the council. For it to get on the April referendum, even though it seems many, many months away, the process and procedures it has to go through, there's a lot of hurdles to get to that point. My understanding from some people who are on the task force is it hasn't met since August. We're now in October. Is there any idea as to when the council, who would have to vote on that, and then the public for the dollars and cents to build out the schools, would get a recommendation? If not, is that something we can communicate through the board, or should we go directly to the task force? I don't mean to be, sort of pejorative here, but I just don't understand. I thought they were meeting more often, and I didn't realize that it was something that has been going on for a while, but I haven't met since August, at least as a body. So I'm concerned as a council member when I'll get a recommendation for what we as a council need to do, and then how we review that and then put it to the voters for a referendum.
Thank you for the question, Councilman Sada. I think at the last meeting it was discussed, this exact timetable was discussed, and I think at the meeting it was said that during the month of November that those proposals need to be finalized in order to meet an April referendum date. If that's realistic or not, again, I'm not an expert on that, but that was the time frame that was discussed. So I would expect that sometime in November, that final list of proposals will need to be finalized, or that list of proposals will need to be finalized for communication to the council in December. I think that was the original time frame that was set out by the task force. I hope that answers the question.
It answers the question, so people know it's not on the board or for building up the schools. That's money that the city council has to either come up with through revenue or through bonding, and that goes to the public. That's not part of the school budget, and so that's just a concern of the timing here. If we have to get it by November to meet an April referendum, and that doesn't happen, we may not be able to get it to referendum until next November, and that delays it all for another 8-9 months. So,
That's why the time frame is important to keep. And don't forget, what we're talking about in terms of this referendum is only the brick, as Councilman Sadi alludes to, the brick and the mortar. In order to fill the classrooms or to supply them, we need to deal with those questions in our operating budget as well for the next school year. And those discussions will be concurrent along with the discussions on any referendum. It's the same time frame to talk about operating budget. And I've said this at many board meetings, it doesn't pay, we could build 300 classrooms, but if we don't have the operating budget to staff them, they're going to sit empty, and that's money wasted. So we need to address the issues of our operating budget along with the brick and mortar questions that we're facing. But it's taken a while, but we're trying to put together, or the task force is trying to put together a package that makes sense, that addresses the longer-term needs of the district at every level that has an issue. And we have issues at every level. We care a lot about elementary and more about middle school. But if you look at the high school as well, there are some issues that need to be addressed there as well. There's crowding there as well. So we'll look for a plan in November that will be put to referendum in April.
Now, one of the things I neglected to tell, the question, why didn't Danbury move in a more aggressive way than Bridgeport and New Haven? I'm talking to Dr. Glass, who had been in Bridgeport for a number of years. Bridgeport built a school every year, and he was there for 19 years. Their reimbursement level was almost 98, 99 cents on the dollar, where Danbury is 50 cents on the dollar. So they basically got new schools for almost no money, so they rehabbed and redid it. I think that's why it was so aggressive in terms of building, particularly bricks and mortar, redoing their building. So with that, thank you. Do you have any questions? Thank you very much for coming. I appreciate it. Good evening.
I'm Officer Jay Mortera from Danbury Police Department, Community Affairs Division. I'll talk a little bit today about the Child Passenger Safety Program. We do inspections on Mondays, 3 Mondays a month from 8 a.m. till 2 p.m. And basically what we do in a nutshell is we check the child restraint to make sure that there's no defects, check it under the National Recall List, and we'll do a visual inspection, make sure all the components are correct and there, and then we will make sure that the car seat is installed properly.
All right, so we're going to push in toward the back of the seat. Okay, I'm just going to run the seatbelt through. Still want to switch this over. You don't want to pull all the way out and switch it over if you're tracked over. Okay, just lock it in. Still pushing in toward the back of the seat. Push down. Take all the slack out. And there's a lock off over here on the other side. You had it through both of them? Yeah. Just gonna go through the one opposite the buckle over here. Okay. And that bypasses the shoulder portion of the lap belt so it doesn't tip it up. Okay. You want to check it here. You want the seat to move less than each side to side. And you can see that the car's moving. Okay, so that's in there tight.
Okay, do you want to mark that?
There's a, yeah, you have a marker?
Seatbelt?
Yeah.
So he knows where it's got to be.
I'm going to mark the seatbelt here. Okay. So you'll know if you have to take this out where you have to get it to in order for it to be tight. Okay. want the bubble to be in between the lines here to make sure you have the appropriate recall. So pop the carrier in. Just make sure when you pop this in, here, click like that.